24 races. It feels like it was this time last year I did another video scratching my head over it going to 23 races in a season, but I think it might actually only be 22 races this season because of the whole, Russia thing. And if I do repeat stuff from that previous video, I do apologise, but there's other stuff that's happened in between these two videos that the FIA has announced it wants to do, which they kind of completely go against this, if you follow me. So it might mean that this is a quick video. It might mean it's longer than normal. We'll see how things go. But with 24 races in a season, it means that teams are going to be busier than ever. I mean, everyone seems to be focused on the drivers and writing things like, oh, they get paid all of that money and they need to do a bit of extra work. But with how physical Formula 1 is, the drivers are likely to get burned out too. But really, the focus for this video is on the people who build the cars rather than the people that race them. Take this example from motorsport.com, which was basically a long-winded quote from a Formula 1 mechanic. Who they are or who they work for is totally unknown. They are completely anonymous. So what I've done is I basically paraphrased bits of it and just cropped out the more important parts, if you can call it that, to give to you here. Now, normally when I do the quote bits of videos or information parts in videos, you see the blue-hued B-roll and then you see the text come up on screen. But because this bit is probably going to take so long to do, I'm just going to put some generic B-roll up and then you can have me on as a podcast rather than this talking cue ball. Life on the road as a Formula 1 mechanic is tough. It's always been that way and none of us do it because we're after an easy time. But as the calendar has expanded and the triple headers become the norm, things have hit a breaking point for a lot of people who work in the garages. From the Wednesday before a race until the Sunday night, it's a minimum of 12-hour days every day. You don't realise what that takes out of you until you go back to work in the factory, and a normal 8-hour day is almost comical because it feels so short. It is so relentless with no recovery time. You work from the moment you get off the plane, and that can be after a really crappy flight where you've been crammed in economy class and got little to no sleep. After the end of season triple header in Mexico, Brazil and Qatar, so this is from 2021, the combination of punishing economy flights, late timetables and time zone changes meant everyone was absolutely shattered, and that is when I think I saw people struggling the most. You get home and you haven't slept properly in days. That then affects how you feel in your personal time. It means your relationships suffer, either because you're agitated or you've got other things on your mind, and that's not fair on them. You are not just mentally fatigued, but physically as well. There's a hell of a lot of injuries happening. There are doctors and physios, but the easiest solution is to pump you full of painkillers. For those that don't want to do the painkillers, there's alcohol. It's difficult to balance the relentlessness of it with the really high expectations that are placed on everyone to work to the highest level. No one wants a car that retires or crashes, and that adds to the stress. When mistakes happen, you're asked why it was allowed to happen, and that makes you more stressed. Garages can be very toxic at times, and what could be considered banter can quickly cross a line. Curfew has helped a bit, and teams have realised that giving people their own hotel rooms doesn't affect the budgets that much, and that is also helping us. But when you do mentally break down, there's no support. No one is going to catch you. There is the if you don't like it leave mentality from fans and management, but that attitude shows how out of touch some are with the reality of what is needed in Formula 1. The reality that you cannot replace staff like light bulbs. Formula 1 is close to its tipping point, and more people are talking about quitting now than at any other time I've been in the sport. Wages have flatlined. Teams aren't raising wages in line with inflation because they don't want the other teams to know what they're spending. We can work in Formula 2, Formula E, the WEC or other series for slightly less money, but without having to do 23 races a year. And does it make sense to exempt the highest earning people at the team who get way more luxuries than we do on the floor? You can't really plot a normal career path. In the past you could aspire to be number one mechanic, chief mechanic, and then higher still, each time getting a decent pay hike. But pay grades just aren't there. And if staff inside the sport can't see a future, then how do you attract the new most promising individuals? More downtime for exercise and recovery, some proper health checks to ensure we perform at our very best, and just a better understanding of what our life is really like when you hit those brutal low points in the middle of yet another triple header. It would mean the world. Now that is the abridged version of what was on motorsport.com, and I think he does have a point regarding the whole if you don't like it leave crowd, the type that seem to think that it's 23 working weekends a year, you get paid megabucks, you get to see the world, and you're essentially paid to watch Formula 1. But the general consensus from what I've read from different anonymous mechanics online is they see the airports, they see the hotels, they see the circuits, and any roads in between. And suggesting they actually get to go into Tokyo when they visit Japan or kick a football on Copacabana Beach in Brazil is a bit misguided? Is that the best word? It's the same way we're seeing teachers, nurses, care workers, police officers, paramedics and so on all quitting their professions. Being a teacher is a very rewarding job. Saving lives is a very noble as well as I'm assuming, very rewarding job. Being a police officer and helping someone in need and so on. And I'm sure there's people watching this video who are in inverted commas, normal jobs where there's politics going on, bickering and backstabbing and things like that. Hours you have to work, unnecessary pressure you put under to make profit and meet targets and things like that will just make you go, you know what? I'm not paid enough for this rubbish. I'm not being paid enough to deal with these demands from management. I'm not being paid enough to deal with the politics or what the government wants me to do. I'm not being paid enough to go out there with substandard equipment and get my head kicked in because I wasn't equipped to defend myself. I'm not being paid enough to have substandard PPE, and so on. And having seen Break F1, the YouTuber who actually worked for Red Bull, have a good chuckle at some of the responses to his thoughts on things, I mean, sure, it's all well and good there being lots of people waiting in line for their crack at working for a Formula 1 team, or how one individual would love to do that job and all of that stuff. But the thing is, Formula 1 teams don't want young, ready and willing. They want good. To use the Alan Hansen quote, you won't win anything with kids. Now, obviously, the class of 92 and so on, but inexperienced kids working at a Formula 1 team isn't what they want. And if you do end up replacing mechanics or staff members like light bulbs, it's going to devalue things, if you follow me. The bit about NASCAR is always the eye roller for me. NASCAR can pull that kind of thing off because NASCAR is all in one country. NASCAR isn't going from Azerbaijan to Canada in the space of a few days. NASCAR also operates at a much lower level in terms of the amount of personnel that go to a race and also the operating costs. So they've always got a car ready to go. They've always got a hauler on the road. They're always ready to go. It's a constant conveyor belt. Formula 1, meanwhile, has to load everything onto a plane and send it to the next destination. And when it arrives, you've got a bunch of jet-lagged human beings pulling everything out and setting it up. So has Formula 1, in the words of this mechanic, reached its tipping point? Has it truly reached money and reach and viewers at the expense of the people who work in the sport? Has it also reached the point of no return because all these races have now signed on with contracts, and probably on for multiple years as well, on massive money deals? And then for F1 to then turn around and say, you know what, we've made a terrible mistake, we need to scale it back to 18 races or so a season? Well, who do they drop? And how much is that going to cost in legal fees to buy out the contracts? F1 seems to have stuck itself in this corner, and it's going to be an awful long time until it's able to get out of it. Waiting for contracts to expire so they can drop races and get the calendar down to a more manageable level. Remember as well that this is the same Formula 1 that's saying we need to cut costs, we need to be more sustainable, we want to be carbon neutral by 2030, we want to do this, this, this and this, but we're also going to make teams, drivers, personnel, all this other stuff do 130,000 miles in, what, 3/4 of a year or something like that? Formula 1 it's going like football. Too many football matches in one season. Football players playing too many games a season, they're going to get burnout. Mechanics doing too much work or too many long hours, plus jet lag and things like that, they're going to get burned out. Players are going to run the risk of injury. The mechanics are going to run the risk of collapsing or being too tired to put a nut and bolt on properly, and this other stuff. There's only so much that the human body can take before it conks out, and every single one of us has a breaking point. Forget the wages, right? Forget the wages, forget the money, forget the paychecks. If a footballer is part of a team doing upwards of 90 competitive games a season for these top clubs, and he's playing all 90 minutes in at least, 70 of those? it's going to add up. And if he's constantly out on the treatment table because his hamstring is playing up, then that sends a sign to management that he's doing too much. And maybe I am actually starting to turn into the "it was better in my day" type of racing fan. The sort of person that I've had a go at many, many times on this channel, saying it wasn't as good as you think it was. But on this occasion, it might actually be. You know, I'm old enough to remember the days of 16, 17 races a season. I remember there being 4 weeks between the Luxembourg Grand Prix at the Nürburgring in 1998 and the Japanese Grand Prix in 1998. Okay, 4 weeks between those 2 races, but there was a championship decider in Japan. It was 4 weeks of anticipation. Now the races are on every week, nearly. You know, you will have occasionally 2 weekends in between, but you know, it's killing that sense of anticipation. The races are now less of an occasion, less of a show. And ironically, F1's chase of putting on the show is killing the show. But it isn't just the mechanics either. Catering, PR, all the other stuff we don't see going on behind the garages. They'll all be affected in the long run. And short of bringing B crews to these further afield races to allow people to recharge and see families and things like that, there isn't much of a fix for this. And even if they did allow B crews, how big is the talent pool? Do you go young and willing, or do you go good? That's the dilemma. That's what the teams want. There might be a lot of poaching coming from different teams. There probably isn't a fix, and F1 is looking at the potential for a mass walkout. Unions inbound, maybe? I don't know. But anyway, I've taken up far too much of your time here today. If you think I've said some interesting things, then do give the video a like. And if you want to see more from this channel, hit that subscribe thing, because it will tell you when I do new videos. It's very clever, this internet thing, isn't it? Massive thanks to the kind folk at Patreon for the continued support, and if you want to help pay for some of these lovely images that you see in these videos, the link is down there, along with links to Discord and also to my socials. Or there's super thanks if you just want to buy me a beer or a coffee or whatever. So until next time, I've been AdmiralLaWind, have a cracking day wherever you live in the world, and I'll see you all again soon for another video. Goodbye.